afternoon. I'm Jamie West from Arizona's Morning News on KTAR, and thank you for joining me for this special roundtable along with ABC 15 News anchor Javier Soto. And all week on both KTAR and ABC 15, you've been hearing and seeing stories about the real people who actually live and work along Arizona's southern border. And we sent teams of reporters to spend 48 hours on the border, and they have come back with incredible and unique stories to tell.
Jim Chilton, like you said, fifth-generation rancher, about 85 years old, self-described cowboy, not a wimp. And he's a character. But he took us on a tour. Ford and myself rode on this. Took 5 hours probably?
Yeah, it was 4 hours, I think, just to get to the bottom half of his property.
Yeah, down that cow trail on the side of the mountain. And it was eye-opening from a number of reasons. The migrants that were, on the U.S. side of the border. He took us to an area where the border wall construction had stopped, but if you go west from there were gaps in the wall, some 100 feet wide, some 20, 25 feet wide. Some had vehicle barriers. Other parts didn't have any vehicle barriers. But we saw dozens of migrants from several different countries down there.
And he's concerned because of the gaps on the barriers where his property lines up, which is like how many miles would you say?
A little over
of the
5
border?
miles.
It's at 5 miles of the international boundary.
Right against the border. And the gaps there funnel migrants right onto his property, correct?
Yeah, and he was very compassionate toward the migrants. Absolutely no ill feelings toward them at all.
Well, so far as he's installed, I think it was 29 different water fountains on his property because he noticed that, and something tragically we saw, people have died on his property.
Like 35, right?
35 since he's been there in 1987.
Wow.
But he found his cowboys. He has 5 cowboys. One of them found a body on, I think he said 2 or 3 years ago, and alerted him to that. But, and I can understand it. Even at this time of the year, it's brutal. I mean, it is some of the most remote country, rugged country I've been into in Arizona the whole time I've been here.
Right.
Tucson's probably 60 miles from where we're at, but the cartels bring them across and say, right over the hill there, and it's not. And, I mean, on a person in good health, in good shape, to hike out of there would probably take days.
And we're talking families, too. You had a lady ask you if you had a baby bottle.
Yeah, we were in the truck, and she asked all of us if we just had a baby bottle. That's all she wanted.
You went down to Douglas, correct?
Yeah, KTAR news reporter Heidi Hamel and myself and people from ABC 15 as well, we all went to Douglas, Arizona. Hector and Felipe, the 2 people I spoke to down there, they talked about how when people crossed that line, they didn't think about going into a foreign country. They said when they would go visit Agua Prieta, they didn't think they were going into a foreign country.
And when did things start changing for them, and how much has it changed?
So the indication we got is it's been a slow dynamic change. How it used to be, going further back to the 50s and 40s, this is going back to their childhood, the dynamic was people would come over for the day, work in the day, and go back home. What has happened, slowly over those decades is that people don't want to come and work for the day. They have longer term plans for when they want to come to the United States, and that puts a strain on communities like Douglas.
Joining us is KTAR's Heidi Hamel. You were in Cochise County, Douglas specifically, right? And taking a look at how strapped these small communities are for resources without any federal help. And yet the feds are bringing the migrants to them, right?
Yes, we went down to Douglas, and one of our first interviews there was with Cochise County Supervisor Ann English. And she told us that the community in Douglas, they're empathetic to these migrants, but they're growing frustrated because when they cross over illegally in that section of the border, Border Patrol will, they claim asylum to Border Patrol, and then they're brought into Douglas to be processed. And now there's not a lot of resources in Douglas. It's a very small town. So from there, they're then bused from a state-funded bus program to Phoenix or Tucson, a larger transportation hub, to go stay with a sponsor and wait for their asylum hearing.
What kind of solutions is the county and are the cities working on or hoping for?
Right now, Supervisor English said she's just worried about funding because, as a Board of Supervisors member, she's in charge of the budget. So she said the bus program, or actually talked to Dima, who's in charge of the state-funded bus program, and it's secure through the rest of this fiscal year. But end of June, unless there's more money, they're worried about, what if those migrants aren't bussed out of Douglas? The community's worried, what if the buses stop coming?
And they're relying heavily on nonprofits as well, right?
Correct. So from Douglas, a lot of them are brought to Casa Alitas in Tucson. And I spoke to the executive director there, Diego Pina Lopez, and he does a lot of work helping these migrants. But he told me that he receives federal funding, and that federal funding is set to run out April 1st, which is in a few weeks. And after that, Border Patrol will no longer bring the migrants to Casa Alitas in Tucson. They're going to drop them off somewhere around the Greyhound bus station in Tucson.
We're not going to find the answers today, but boy, I sure feel more informed. I feel, and I hope you do too, if you've been listening to this past 2 hours, that you feel a little bit more familiar about what is actually happening along the border and how it's affecting not only Arizonans, but the people who live and work along the border on the Mexican side as well.